At this point in the course, one skill set we need to hone a little bit more is errors, exception handling, and debugging. So we're going to spend some time learning that. And we're first going to start off with a few tips around debugging. And this is, again, just finding issues with our code and fixing them. That's essentially what we're talking about with debugging. So some processes we can use, there are multiple ways to do this, but some processes we can use are we can use print statements. If we're writing a program and we just really quick want to see perhaps what's going on in a very concise way, we could just input a print statement, print out some variables, and print out some helpful data that we need. And then we can run the program if there's no repercussions to that. Just running it at will. So print statements can be very useful. We should examine the stack traces. So when an error occurs, read the stack trace. And what the stack trace is it just shows where the error is coming from. When we run our Python program, if the output is an error, the stack trace is the sequence of errors and the sequence of code that led to that error. So it can often tell us things like the error message, line numbers, and the call stack that offer clues about the root cause. So when we see an error, our first instinct may just be, oh, what's the error? But if we dig a little bit deeper and read that stack trace, that error message, that can be very helpful. We've learned some debuggers with our IDEs, with PyCharm and VS Code. Those are immensely helpful to leverage their built-in debugging tools. They have many advanced features, and that is the way that I suggest always debugging in general, because it's so useful and so easy to do. So our IDEs are a great development tool, and debugging is one of the benefits they offer us. One thing we'll talk about here in a few videos is something called PDB, Python's built-in debugger. Now, sometimes we don't have access to an IDE or to a graphical display on a remote host. We might have to do some development or some debugging on a server or a computer that we don't have a GUI to. And PDB is something, I've seen this in practice, where we can log in, we can SSH in our terminal to a remote machine, and we can use PDB. We import PDB, and then we can set the trace, which is essentially like setting a breakpoint in an IDE. But we're all at the command line here. We're all at the command line. And so PDB allows us to do that remote debugging where we don't have an IDE, where we don't have a graphical user interface. We can use PDB, and that we can go continue with the code after we set that breakpoint. We can see the values of variables. We can step into functions or step over them, just like we do with a debugger in our IDE. But with PDB, we're doing it at the command line. So I'll show you that here in a few videos. Another useful tip: isolate the issue. Try to reproduce the code. Reduce the code to the smallest version that reproduces the error, and that can help make the problem more evident. And then there's some external resources like Google, ChatGPT, Stack Overflow, etc. My first go-to now when I'm debugging something is ChatGPT. These AI tools have changed the way that programming happens, and that I have not used Google for an error or Stack Overflow in months, because ChatGPT is so good at it. At debugging, I can input my code or I can input the error, and it often will tell me what the error is. Our IDEs, actually, PyCharm and VS Code and others, they actually often have AI tools like ChatGPT built in. So we'll probably get into that in a bit in the course, but we can, within our IDE, run a large language model, or run a chat bot, if you will, and that can help us debug right there on the spot. So a lot of the time, these will be the quickest way to get to the bottom of our error as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. Lots of different ways to debug our code, things to keep in mind, and we'll continue learning about that a little bit in this section, and different ways to do that.